Reporters are often under tight deadlines and drowning in daily pitches from PR pros. How can brands and organizations stand out to attract the earned media attention they desire? Should they develop more of their own content to get public and media attention? Welcome to the Adlibber podcast, featuring conversations of influence. Some of it planned, much of it ad-libbed.
Welcome back to the Adlibber. I'm your host, Jay Scott, Senior Media Relations Manager here at Gavin. Today we're talking about media relations. I've asked my fellow Gavin PR colleagues, John Buffone and Jim Cronin, to join me today on the podcast where we're going to talk about our collective journalism experiences and how they've helped us cross over to public relations and how it helps us advise clients across different industry sectors. So let's jump right in. I mean, we all support a range of clients, some areas of specialization, healthcare, nonprofits, finance, legal. It runs the gamut. John, how do you draw from your reporter experience to kind of help you generate media attention, or you know, what do you look back at and say, you know, this has really helped me in what I do now?
Well, first, excited to be on with you, Jay. But I would say one of the biggest things coming from the world of journalism is knowing what you would read and what you would not read if it were emailed to you. So I put my reporter hat back on whenever I'm trying to reach out to the media or trying to pitch a story where if I were still the reporter, would I even give this the time of day to open? Or once I open it, is it worth my time? So I don't ever send anything out that I myself as a reporter would not open or read or at least be interested in. So I think coming from that background and understanding that newsrooms are inundated with pitches and news releases and advisories all the time, knowing that what they will open, knowing what they are interested in, knowing what they will run in their publication or station really gives you an advantage in this world because, like I said, all of those newsrooms are being flooded with different pitches or different angles every day. And you kind of have to know what's inside their head when you're doing your own pitching.
Jim, what about you? I mean, we obviously get into specific areas, specific types of clients on many days where you got to put your healthcare cap on, or you got to work with folks in crisis potentially. What do you draw from your own background as a reporter? How does it help you when you're going into those client situations?
Yeah, you know, I think and fully agree 100% with what John was saying. And I think, you know, understanding kind of the pressures that reporters are under, the time constraints that they have, their editors breathing down their necks, you know, knowing what they need from you and giving it to them in as little of small a package as possible so that they can just, you know immediately it's going to be something that they're going to cover and they don't have to put too much thought into it until they really want to. And if they actually want to go forward with a story, as well as just knowing that if you send them, you know, quotes and material content that they can just copy, paste, plug and play. It just makes their job so much easier. And that makes it more likely for them to come back to you in the future for stories because they know that you're helping them do their job and you're easy to work with.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree. I mean, I'm thinking about that myself. And just this past year, as the business keeps evolving, we know the media is, you know, the business is very fragmented, more general assignment reporters, shorter lead times, a lot more written answers to questions. You know, they're interested in talking to a client, you know, they're interested in the topic generally, but they don't have time for extensive phone interviews sometimes. So if you can get really specific via email of what you need and you can provide it in a short window, I found that, you know, it's very, very fruitful for a lot of our clients. I mean, I don't know if you guys experience the same thing with respect to writing versus like live interviews. It does feel like we're going more in one direction, at least during, you know, this part of, this part of the pandemic.
No, I think you're absolutely right. And I think with us, at least us three, having that journalistic background, knowing the evolution of media, where, like you said, Jay, there are beats are being more and more merged, or I should say broadened. So everyone is covering everything, and to kind of understand that a lot of reporters are being stretched thin across not just their beat, but across the newsroom, being asked to do things that they have never done before. So getting them those quick hits where they could be working on 3 or 4 different stories at one time, they can't dedicate an hour, 30 minutes, heck, even 15 minutes for a live interview, much less a phone call. So to be able to get them those things immediately that they can plug into the story, that might be the only way you can get into that story, because they just don't have the time and schedules don't align, be it your client schedule or the reporter schedule. Being able to understand that the media, whether it's TV or newspaper or online publication, those schedules are intense, and a lot of the times a reporter just doesn't have a lot of free time throughout the day. So being able to accommodate that is in the best interest of your client, to make sure that they get as much exposure as possible, because sometimes squeezing yourself into that small window of opportunity is very difficult.
And piggybacking on that, and reporters are covering like 3 or 4 beats as well. Sometimes it was funny when I was working for an environmental nonprofit as pretty much their in-house PR person. There was a guy who was covering the environment out in Oregon, and then he was covering transportation on top of that, and then he was covering like local utilities on top of that. So you're trying to break through, which one of these does he have time, and is it going to be interesting for him and his editor of these different topics that he covers to actually write about?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a good segue. I was kind of thinking about our own backgrounds. I mean, mine was primarily print with, weeklies, dailies, business journal experiences. You guys obviously have different experiences in other forms of media, TV and whatnot. But like, what stands out to you, like, about your career path into journalism to say, yeah, I'm qualified to do this now, the media relations stuff? Like what experiences or what beats did you cover that you feel like translated really well when you made the jump, and have helped you now advise clients to to understand what they need to do in terms of media relations?
I would say my background in television, I worked in both print and in broadcast, but I would say television helped immensely, because I think television reporters greatly appreciate someone who speaks their language, and trust me, it is their own language. So whenever I get a call from a television reporter saying, hey, I'd love to be able to do an interview, and we all know that sometimes TV reporters want to do those interviews that day, so it's not always the easiest thing to coordinate. But whenever I answer back and say, oh, is this a VOSOT or is this a package? And all of a sudden their eyes light up like, I can't believe you know what those acronyms stand for. I can't believe you know what I'm talking about. So being able to relate with those reporters speaking their own language, I think goes a long way. And they are more inclined to come back to you with stories, because they know you understand where they're coming from. You have a common ground where you can kind of understand. He knows that I'm under a deadline, that I have to have this ready for the 5 o'clock, or he knows that this is only going to be a 45-second story, so they're not going to be angry whenever they see there's only one snippet, because they know what the labeling is for a lot of this stuff. So I think being able to relate with reporters by really finding common ground goes a long way. And just going back real quick to Jim's point, he's absolutely right about people just covering numerous beats, because I remember the last time I was working in a print newsroom, we would get a call and a tip, and the mass email that would go out would be like, who does this fall under anymore? who does this bleed into now? Is that you? Is that me? I'm not really sure. So that kind of shows you that if you're going to go after a media outlet that you really, really want to get a story placed in, maybe go to multiple people within that outlet, because they're not even sure who's covering those issues anymore. Sometimes it's because of either people leaving or downsizing or reshuffling things. If you're really intent on getting a story placed in a particular outlet, maybe send that to a couple people within that outlet, because there's sometimes confusion within the reporter circle.
Yeah, I mean, I know coming into Gavin doing PR stuff, a lot of people knew me working as a business journal reporter, and that is kind of relatable factor for a lot of business and finance reporters that I work with now and pitch stories to, because I had that experience. I kind of know what they want. But I actually think, for me, the more influential stuff was when I was working at the Weekly, when I came out of school, or when I was at a daily covering like county government, school district issues, because I was learning about municipal government, about finance, about public pension issues. You have to cover sports somewhere in there. I mean, all these things you get exposed to. I think those things help me, transition to like other things. And business was obviously one thing I did for a while. And all those things have a role and influence on what we do now, or what I do when helping clients. But I mean, I don't know if you guys have those things where you look back and say, well, geez, 5 or 10 years ago, the stuff I was doing then, it really does come back full circle and it relates to what I'm doing now for X client or whoever.
I'm working with school districts on crisis communications work, and they were having their board meeting, and they were concerned about the meeting getting possibly a little rowdy. And so I reached back to when I was a reporter covering government meetings, and just thinking about, okay, what do they do in those meetings? They have a little clock on the table so that people can see, this is your time, this is how much you have. You can't dispute the fact that your 2 minutes of speaking at this public meeting is up. It's time to pass it to the next person. And just thinking about all of those things, that when you would go to a meeting, you think, okay, here's the checklist that they had to do to make this run effectively. And that just I was really surprised how that transferred so directly to helping these folks run a smooth meeting, especially with some controversial topics happening.
Yeah, and to your point, Jim, I work with a lot of healthcare clients, and there was a time where a big time legislator was going to be making an appearance and doing a press conference, and so it was drawing a lot of media attention, not just locally but throughout the entire state. And so I had to meet with the client saying, listen, I know what I would be asking in this situation as the reporter. So this is what you need to be prepared for. When a big time politician comes to your area, there's a good chance that the media is going to ask questions outside of the topic of why he's actually there, he or she is actually there. So if the politician is there to talk about the COVID vaccine, don't be surprised if someone asks 2 or 3 questions about medicinal marijuana. Don't be surprised if they start talking about legislation outside of healthcare, because these reporters don't always get a lot of access to these politicians to have one-on-one. So be prepared for a lot of these questions to be thrown out during the press conference. So in case they do, you're not caught off guard. This is typical. So as a reporter, I remember when the governor would be touring a facility, and all of a sudden he would get 4 or 5 off the wall questions about something totally different from why he was actually at that facility. And the people at the facility were kind of taken aback, like, what are we supposed to do? What are we supposed to say? And just drawing from those experiences, just knowing, hey, this is probably going to come up. Just be prepared for it. It's not, this is mostly on that politician, but don't be distraught if these questions do come about during the press conference.
So that really gets to the heart of what makes media relations people so critical to crisis communications plans, is helping people prepare for the unexpected, understanding that a reporter isn't just going to stick to what you want them to be asking about, and you need to be able to bridge away from those troublesome questions back to your key messages, so that you're staying on message and telling them what you want to be telling them, and that you're driving the conversation and not letting the reporter drive it.
We're doing the same thing, relationship building, talking to people about what they're working on right now, but also what they might be working on down the road, that we can get a handle on what that is. And also the other part of what we do, guys, I mean, it's not just getting them, media interviews and getting them in the paper or on TV. It's, a lot of helping them create their own content or plan events, or, take a different approach to getting their message out there. And sometimes that does, jump into what we do on the digital side, or in some other creative realm. But how would you say that, I guess, that stuff has really changed, especially during the pandemic? The the owned media, or trying to create podcasts, for example. Like there's a lot of other ways we're getting helping clients out. What would you say stands out to you most about kind of this era that we're in with all the different forms of media?
Yeah, I would say that the pandemic forced everyone into a new age of communicating and public relations and media relations in general, just because now you have to think outside the box and how you reach people, because for the longest time, and even still a little bit today, people will not do in-person interviews. So it'll be through Zoom or Teams or whatever platform you're using. But also, public relations itself, it really became that all-encompassing term where you're trying to reach people through social media influencers, or you're trying to find pages where you can get your message out in front of as many eyes as possible. So building relationships with trusted voices, depending on the group and demographic you're going after, can be just as effective as getting somebody placed in the local newspaper or on television, because there are plenty of people who are not responsive to reading the newspaper or getting their news from traditional media outlets, or they're not sitting in front of their television at 5 o'clock watching news. So you have to be able to reach them in different ways, and maybe they only pay attention to the groups that they trust, and maybe they have a Facebook page or a Twitter or an Instagram there where they get a lot of their information from. So being able to connect with those trusted voices and get your message out, or explain your efforts to those particular people, and then they disperse it to the people who trust them and get their information from them, is just as effective as some of the traditional media relations that all of us here are used to.
Yeah, I mean, I think another part of it too is, there's a lot more internal communication stuff that we do that we maybe didn't think about in the past. I mean, coming in as a former reporter, I didn't realize that it involves so many other things, not just the social media. I mean, that's kind of a given, but you might be working on website content, you might be supporting copy for ads, you might be doing a whole host of other things, letters, internal newsletters to staff at a company. That's just as important, maybe sometimes, or more important to certain industries and clients, to communicate with their trade groups, their employees within that industry, and maybe less so about actually doing media. Like not everybody values that or has that at the top of their list. Sometimes it is, we don't do a great job communicating as a whole. So we're creating these brand strategies, these communication strategies, maybe to communicate more internally, right? I mean, I know you've probably all been a part of that. I have been. So is that something that you were, I guess the question is, was that something you were prepared for coming over from being a reporter, that it wouldn't just be external?
It's right before I joined Gavin, I was a communications consultant for a couple of different nonprofits, and they were both really focused on building the brands of their executives, and boosting them up as thought leaders in their industries. And so that involved direct newsletters from the executive directors and presidents, and really building their brand on LinkedIn, creating kind of similar to TED Talks for them. And that was because through conversations with me, they realized that we had tried to do some more traditional earned media, and it just wasn't really happening for them. So we realized we needed to pivot and focus on this stuff. And we had some really good followings for the newsletters, especially coming directly, from the tops of these organizations. People were really, really eager for that information.
Yeah, and I think that, not to keep harping on this, but that's why we're here. We're former reporters, and we're able to take that information and tell interesting stories. So Jay, to your question, it's maybe not something that I was prepared for, but I think that it's something that we take too quickly, because when you got that storyteller gene in you, where you can take this information and you can really turn it into a story that's going to captivate people. That's a skill that can be used on a number of ways. So whenever you're developing that internal content, you can use that to really spotlight the strengths of your client, to really spotlight the efforts of that client. And then you can put that on a website or an internal blog, and then you can publicize that throughout your social media platform. So if you want to make sure that story is told, and like Jim said, sometimes it's hard to get that placed in traditional media, then you just, you take on the role yourself as the content creator, and you say, we need this story to be out because this is important to our effort. This is important to our brand. We're going to make sure this gets put out. So you develop it yourself, and then you publicize it yourself. And that, once again, depending on where you place it, or you put it in Facebook groups, or you get it in front of the right eyes, it can be just as effective. So I think developing that internal content is something that we've seen a little bit more of in the last year, and it has proven to be effective.
I think the training as a journalist and knowing how to write really concisely and clearly is, it's critical to persuasive communication. So the training is right there.
I guess, where do you think public relations is going from a client perspective, or what other tools we may look to integrate to, take it a step further?
Well, if you try to forecast where public relations is going to go, you're going to be right about as many times as the local weatherman is. But I will say that I think, going off of our last point of internal content, you might see more companies, firms, groups create an internal newsroom where they can push out as much information as they want, and they're not going to feel like they're reliant on, I really hope a newspaper picks this up, or I really hope a TV station runs with this. Where you can create your own mini news outlet where people are telling your story constantly. Now, it's going to take a lot of work to make sure that is branded correctly, and make sure that it's put out in front of the right people, and it's being able to be read and seen by as many people as possible. But I think that there's going to be a big push and effort in that.
That the main point of this is that public relations is it's not just one thing. There's a lot of other facets to what we do on a daily basis, and certainly trying to make things as easy as we can, whether it is internal focused or external, or both. I mean, it's likely going to be a lot of internal and external throughout the process of working with Gavin on various types of content.
Thank you for listening to the Adlibber podcast. To find new episodes and get more content from our team here at Gavin, make sure to visit our website at adlibberpodcast.com. The Adlibber is also available on Spotify and Apple Podcasts.